You wake up in the morning, prepare your coffee, check the notifications on your phone, and head out for another day of work. There's something comforting about this routine, isn't there? A sense that the world will continue spinning exactly as it did yesterday, as it did last month, as it has for the past few years. You make plans for the next decade. Imagine where you'll be in 5 years. Set professional goals. Perhaps dream about that promotion or that business you've always wanted to start. But what if I told you that all of this, all this comfortable predictability that you project into the future, is a dangerous illusion? What if the fundamental rules of the game we call modern life are about to change so radically that the world you know today will be unrecognizable in less than a decade? I'm not talking about gradual and predictable changes. I'm talking about a transformation so profound that it will make you look back at this exact moment when you're watching this video and think about how naive we were to believe that things would remain stable. Yuval Noah Harari, one of the most influential thinkers of our time, doesn't just predict this transformation. He points to a specific year, a dividing line in human history, after which nothing will ever be the same. And the most frightening part? That year isn't in some distant, nebulous future. It's right there, closer than you imagine, near enough that many of us will witness this rupture while still in our prime, building careers and planning futures that could simply become obsolete overnight. To understand the magnitude of what's coming, we first need to grasp a fundamental pattern in human history that Harari has explored throughout his entire body of work. Humanity has always lived under the illusion of stability in the moments immediately preceding its greatest transformations. The hunter-gatherers who lived 15,000 years ago couldn't imagine that the agricultural revolution was about to change everything they knew about how humans organized themselves and survived. Medieval peasants couldn't conceive that the Industrial Revolution would radically transform not just how we work, but what it means to be an individual with economic value. And even when these transformations began, most people resisted believing in the extent of the changes, desperately clinging to the idea that the world would return to normal, that things would stabilize again, but they never did. Normal simply ceased to exist, replaced by a new normal that would have been unimaginable to the previous generation. What makes the next transformation particularly unique and frightening is the unprecedented speed with which it will occur. Previous revolutions took centuries, or at least decades, to fully unfold. The revolution that's approaching, driven by artificial intelligence and biotechnology, could reshape all of human civilization in a matter of years, not generations. And Harari has been consistent in pointing out that we're entering the critical phase of this transformation now in this decade, with a point of no return likely occurring around 2030. 2030. Let that number resonate for a moment. It's not the year 2100. It's not some science fiction future distant enough to be abstract. It's only a few years ahead. If you're 30 today, you'll only be 36. If you're 40, you'll be 46. You'll be in the prime of your professional life, possibly with school-age children, with mortgages and retirement plans based on assumptions about how the world works. And suddenly, these assumptions may prove completely obsolete. Around That time marker, according to Harari's analysis and that of many artificial intelligence experts, will cross a crucial threshold. It will be the moment when artificial intelligence systems not only perform specific tasks better than humans, as they already do in many fields, but demonstrate general cognitive capabilities that rival or surpass ours in virtually every domain. We're not talking about sophisticated calculators or specialized algorithms. We're talking about artificial entities capable of genuine creativity, deep understanding, autonomous learning at levels that make human intelligence, for the first time in history, no longer the gold standard of cognitive capability on the planet. But what does this really mean for you, for your concrete life, for the plans you made last night before going to sleep? It means that the foundation upon which we've built our modern identity, the concept of human economic value through work, is about to crumble. For millennia, humans had something unique to offer. Even when machines began to replace our muscles in the Industrial Revolution, we still had our minds, our capacity to think, create, judge, make complex decisions. That was the last fortress of human economic relevance. But what if that fortress is the next to fall? What if, for the first time in history, humans are no longer necessary to perform even the most sophisticated cognitive tasks? This isn't just about some jobs being automated while new jobs emerge in other sectors, as happened in previous revolutions. It's about the real possibility that the very notion of human employment, as we know it, becomes fundamentally obsolete on a timescale that doesn't allow entire societies to adapt gradually. A truck driver might be replaced by autonomous vehicles, but perhaps could retrain as a programmer. But what if programmers are also replaced, and teachers, and doctors, and lawyers, and artists, and scientific researchers? At some point in this cascade of replacements, there's nowhere left for most people to migrate to, because artificial intelligence simply becomes better than us at virtually everything that has measurable economic value. I want to pause for a moment to ask you directly, you who are watching, when you think about your professional future, your career plans, how you imagine yourself 10 years from now, do you really consider the possibility that all of this could become irrelevant? Not because of any failure on your part, not because you didn't try hard enough or didn't adapt, but simply because the fundamental nature of human work changed in ways that are beyond any individual's control? I know it can be terrifying to think about this. We often keep these deep anxieties to ourselves, perhaps even avoid confronting them directly, because they seem too big, too abstract, or because admitting these concerns makes us feel pessimistic or defeatist. But these concerns are absolutely valid and shared by millions of people who are beginning to feel that something fundamental is changing, even if they can't articulate exactly what. If this theme resonates with you, if you've been feeling this anxiety about the future of work and your place in it, share in the comments. It can be as direct as writing which aspect of this transformation worries or intrigues you most. Perhaps it's the idea that your specific profession might not exist in 10 years. Perhaps it's the deeper question of how we'll find meaning and purpose when work is no longer the central axis of our lives. Your voice and your concerns can help others who are facing the same questions feel less isolated in this anxiety. And by naming these fears together, perhaps we can begin to think collectively about how to navigate them. Harari argues that this economic transformation is just one layer of a much deeper and more disturbing change. What's really at stake isn't just the future of employment, but the future of human relevance itself. Throughout our entire history, humans have been the main actors, the protagonists of the story. All the great narratives, all religions, all political ideologies, all social structures were built around the implicit premise that humans are special, unique, indispensable. But what if that premise turns out to be just another useful illusion we tell ourselves? Artificial intelligence doesn't just challenge our economic relevance. It challenges our fundamental understanding of what it means to be human. If a machine can create more beautiful art, more moving music, more profound literature than any human ever created, what remains of the argument that creativity is exclusively human? If an artificial intelligence can demonstrate more consistent and effective empathy than most humans, make wiser ethical decisions, offer more insightful advice, where does our supposed moral and emotional superiority lie? These aren't abstract questions of academic philosophy. They're practical existential dilemmas that we'll begin to face on a massive scale very soon. And there's another, even more unsettling dimension to this transformation. Harari suggests that around 2030, we won't just be dealing with external artificial intelligences that replace human functions. We'll be beginning to see a convergence between biology and technology that could divide humanity itself into fundamentally different castes. Biotechnology and genetic engineering are advancing in parallel with artificial intelligence, and the intersection of these technologies promises to create possibilities that sound like science fiction but are rapidly becoming actual engineering. Imagine an elite that can pay for cognitive enhancements, radical life extension, direct brain-computer interfaces that expand human intelligence through integration with AI. Meanwhile, the majority of humanity might become economically irrelevant, surpassed both by pure artificial intelligences and by enhanced humans who've transcended traditional biological limitations. For the first time in history, inequalities between humans might not just be of wealth or power, but of fundamental biological capabilities. We'll no longer be talking about people who have more or fewer resources, but about people who are, in a very literal sense, biologically superior or inferior. The ethical implications of this are almost impossible to fully comprehend, but the path in this direction is already being forged now in this decade. The year 2030 represents, in Harari's analysis, the approximate point when these multiple transformations converge in a critical way. It's when artificial intelligence will likely achieve general cognitive capabilities equivalent to or superior to humans. It's when the first generation of significantly enhanced humans, biologically and technologically, may begin to emerge in sufficient numbers to create a distinct class. It's when traditional economic structures based on human labor will begin to collapse in sectors critical enough to force fundamental social reorganizations. It's when governments can no longer postpone crucial decisions about how to deal with mass technological unemployment, how to regulate human enhancements, how to maintain social order when the basic premises of industrial society are dissolving. It's the moment when humanity will have to confront, no longer as futuristic speculation, but as present and immediate reality, the question of who and what will be when the technology we created surpasses us. But there's a profound and disturbing irony in this narrative of radical transformation. Harari observes that despite the magnitude of these imminent changes, most people continue living as if nothing extraordinary is about to happen. We continue planning our lives according to 20th century patterns. We prepare our children for careers that might not exist when they reach adulthood. We invest in traditional education based on curricula developed for an industrial world that's disappearing. Our political institutions still operate with the logic of sovereign nation states in an age where the most powerful forces, the technology corporations that are shaping our future, completely transcend national borders. There is a colossal mismatch between the speed of technological change and the speed of social and political change. Technology advances exponentially, doubling its capabilities at ever shorter intervals. But human institutions, our governance structures, our educational systems, our cultural understandings evolve linearly, incrementally, resisting radical change. This gap between technological transformation and social adaptation is rapidly widening, and around 2030, according to Harari, will reach a point where this gap becomes unsustainable, forcing disruptive and potentially chaotic adjustments. Consider the educational system as an example. Right now, in 2026, we're still educating children primarily to memorize information and develop specific skills. But in a world where artificial intelligence has instant access to all accumulated human knowledge and can acquire new skills faster than any human, what's the point of an education based on knowledge accumulation? We know we need to fundamentally change how we prepare the next generations, focusing perhaps on adaptable creativity, emotional intelligence, ethical thinking, capabilities that may remain distinctly human, but making this transition requires completely reimagining not just curricula, but the very structure of how we understand education and human development. And this kind of institutional transformation typically takes decades to implement, decades that we simply don't have before reality forces much more abrupt and disorganized changes. The same pattern repeats in virtually every sphere of society. We know the world is changing radically, but our institutional responses remain trapped in old patterns, and the time to implement orderly changes is running out fast. Harari also points to a crucial psychological dimension of this transformation that's often overlooked. It's not just that the external world is changing. It's that our own internal experience of being human is being reshaped in ways we've barely begun to understand. Consider how technology has already altered fundamental aspects of how we experience reality. Our attention has been fragmented into ever smaller pieces by interfaces designed to maximize engagement. Our social life has been mediated by algorithms that decide who we see, what we see, how we connect. Our emotions are increasingly modulated by content streams, optimized to provoke specific reactions. And this is just the beginning. The next generations of technology promise even deeper integration between mind and machine. Direct neural interfaces may soon allow thoughts and emotions to be monitored, recorded, potentially even externally modulated. The line between what is authentically you, your genuine thoughts and feelings, and what is technological influence or even construction may become increasingly blurred. In the near future, you might no longer know for certain whether a thought you're having, an emotion you're feeling, a desire you're experiencing arose organically from within you or was subtly induced by technological systems with which you're constantly interfaced. The very notion of an autonomous and coherent self, a fundamental premise of almost all Western philosophy and psychology, may prove to be just another convenient illusion that doesn't survive scrutiny in the technological age. This brings us to one of Harari's most provocative observations about what differentiates this coming transformation from all previous revolutions. In past historical transformations, no matter how disruptive, humans remained essentially human. The agricultural revolution changed how we lived, but didn't change our fundamental biology or cognition. The Industrial Revolution changed how we worked and organized ourselves, but again, humans remained biologically unchanged. The current digital revolution changed how we communicate and process information, but so far hasn't directly altered our brains or bodies. The next phase, which gains critical momentum around 2030, is different because for the first time in history, the very nature of what it means to be human is at stake. We are acquiring the power to redesign not just our environment, but ourselves. We may soon be able to edit our genetic code, expand our cognitive capabilities through technological interfaces, radically extend our lifespan, even upload aspects of our consciousness to non-biological substrate. These possibilities raise profound philosophical questions. If you modify your biology and cognition so radically through technology, are you still you? At what point do the modifications become so extensive that they essentially create a different being? And who decides which modifications are allowed? Who has access to them? What kind of humanity we want to become? These aren't questions we'll have the luxury of debating abstractly for decades. The decisions are being made now, often by private corporations and research laboratories operating with minimal regulatory oversight. Around 2030, according to projections by Harari and other thinkers, we'll be confronting the first concrete results of these decisions, the first generation of technologies and practices that begin to fundamentally reshape the human condition. And as a society, as a civilization, we're profoundly unprepared for these choices. Our ethical frameworks were developed for a world where humans were essentially biological constants, where technology was something external that we used, not something that rebuilt us from the inside out. Our political institutions were designed to regulate activities within geographic territories, not to govern transformations that completely transcend borders and can reshape the very nature of their citizens. Our cultural and religious narratives about meaning and purpose were built around the premise of a fixed and special human essence. All these structures are rapidly becoming inadequate, and the deadline for developing new structures is running out. There's also the question of how these transformations will unfold unequally around the world, creating not just inequalities within societies, but potentially fundamental fractures between different regions and nations. The artificial intelligence and biotechnology revolution is being driven primarily by a small number of developed countries and an even smaller number of technology mega corporations. When these technologies reach sufficient maturity to reshape societies around 2030, access to them will be profoundly unequal. Some nations may have the technological capabilities, infrastructure, and resources to adapt, to develop new forms of social organization, to offer their citizens access to cognitive and biological enhancements. Other nations, especially in the developing world, may be left completely behind, trapped in modes of social organization that have become obsolete, with populations whose skills no longer have value in the new global economic marketplace. This could create global divisions on an unprecedented scale, not just in terms of wealth, but of fundamental capabilities and even rights to what it means to be considered fully human. The geopolitics of the end of this decade and beginning of the next may be dominated not by disputes over natural resources or political ideologies, but by conflicts over access to technologies that determine who gets left behind in humanity's transformation and who advances to post-human forms of existence. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of all this is the question of control. Who exactly is directing this transformation? Who will make the crucial decisions that will shape humanity's future? Harari argues that we're in a historically unique situation where the forces reshaping our reality are largely non-governmental, non-democratic, and operate at a speed that makes effective public oversight almost impossible. A handful of technology company CEOs and their engineering teams are making decisions that will have more profound impacts on humanity's future than most international treaties or national legislation. And they're doing this without any democratic mandate, often without adequate transparency, driven primarily by competitive and market imperatives rather than considerations of long-term human well-being. Governments, in turn, are largely playing catch-up, trying to understand technologies that evolve faster than regulatory processes can be implemented, often captured by corporate interests or simply overwhelmed by the complexity of the systems they're supposed to be overseeing. Around 2030, this governance gap may have widened to a crisis point where we have technologies with fundamental transformative power operating essentially without meaningful control, while the institutions that should represent humanity's collective will remain largely irrelevant to the most important decisions being made. So if the world as we know it really has its days numbered, if we're approaching a historical inflection point around 2030, the inevitable question is, what can we do? How can we navigate such a profound and apparently irresistible transformation? Harari doesn't offer easy or comforting answers, and it would be dishonest of me to pretend that simple solutions exist. But he offers some principles for thinking about how we might approach what's coming. First, brutal recognition of reality. We need to stop pretending that the world will remain fundamentally the same, that we can simply continue with our lives and plans as if nothing extraordinary is happening. Denial won't protect us from the transformation that's coming. Second, radical flexibility. In a world changing this rapidly, the most important skill may be the ability to continuously reinvent yourself, to abandon old identities and competencies when they become obsolete, to learn and adapt throughout life. Third, focus on what may remain distinctly human, instead of trying to compete with artificial intelligences in domains where they'll inevitably surpass us. Perhaps we should cultivate the capacities and experiences that define our humanity in ways that go beyond economic utility, genuine creativity, deep emotional connection, ethical wisdom, awareness of our mortality and finitude, the capacity to find meaning not just in productivity but in existence, and perhaps most importantly, radical political engagement. The transformation that's coming isn't an inevitable natural process like a hurricane or earthquake. It's the result of human choices, even if those choices are being made by a very small group of people. As a society, as a civilization, we desperately need to regain some degree of collective control over our destiny, to develop governance structures that can effectively guide these powerful technologies toward directions that serve long-term human well-being, not just short-term profit or geopolitical competition. If you've made it this far in this reflection, if these ideas have provoked something in you, whether a growing discomfort or a curiosity about how we can think more deeply about these challenges, consider joining us on this ongoing journey of exploration. By subscribing to the channel, you'll become part of a community of people who aren't satisfied with superficial narratives about our future, who want to understand the profound transformations we're living through, who seek not just information, but wisdom to navigate these extraordinary times. Each week, we share new perspectives on the philosophical, technological, and existential questions that define our era, always with the goal of illuminating paths through complexity and cultivating a deeper understanding of what's at stake when we talk about humanity's future. I don't offer comforting certainties, but a space for honest and courageous thinking about the real challenges we face. Subscribe to continue this essential dialogue together and to build a collective wisdom more adequate to the revolutionary times in which we live. The year 2030 is just an estimate, of course. The transformations Harari describes may occur slightly earlier or slightly later, but temporal precision isn't really the point. The point is that we're living on the threshold of changes that will fundamentally reshape what it means to be human. And that threshold isn't some distant and abstract horizon. It's the next corner, the next decade, within the lifespan and practical concerns of most of us. When you look at your children, if you have them, they'll grow up in a world that will be almost unrecognizable compared to yours. When you think about your retirement, if you're planning one, the assumptions about pensions and economic structures on which those plans are based may simply not hold. When you invest in education or career development, you're betting on patterns that may dissolve before the return on that investment materializes. This isn't a message of despair, but of urgent need for attention and engagement. We need, as individuals and as a society, to wake up to the magnitude of the historical moment we're living in. We need to have serious conversations about the kind of future we want, about what kind of humanity we want to preserve or become, about how we can maintain dignity and meaning in a world where our traditional assumptions about human value and purpose are being fundamentally challenged. The world you know has its days numbered. This is both terrifying and, strangely, can also be liberating. Because if the old rules are dissolving anyway, if traditional structures are collapsing, then perhaps we have a rare opportunity to reimagine not just how we organize our society, but what we value, what we aspire to, what kind of world we want to build from the ashes of the old. This transformation doesn't have to be just a story of loss and obsolescence. It can also be a story of evolution, of transcending old limitations, of creating new forms of human flourishing that we can't even fully imagine from where we are now. But realizing that positive potential, instead of simply sliding into dystopias of extreme inequality and loss of meaning, will require wisdom, courage, and above all, active collective engagement with the choices we're making at this very moment. Because 2030 may be when the consequences become undeniable, but the crucial decisions that will determine how this transformation unfolds are being made now, at this instant, this year, and all of us, in one way or another, through our choices, our values, our engagement, or our apathy, are